Well, hi all. Today I want to talk about something that I think is important, and it's another view on the Abraham Accord that you may not have heard. Now, I'm not an expert on the Middle East, but what I have done is I have spent some time researching what is happening with the Abraham Accord. And so, is Donald Trump in league with the devil, as some would suggest, as he's carving up the Holy Land? Or was the Abraham Accord actually a good thing? Now, the Abraham Accord, just in case you've been isolated from the news, when I say Abraham Accord, I am talking about when Israel signed the peace treaty with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Now, what did this entail? Now, please listen. You've got to listen right now. This was not about Israeli land at all. Not 1 inch of land was forfeited with the Abraham Accord. This treaty was about diplomatic relations. In other words, Israel will now have normalized relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. They'll be able to establish embassies in the other countries, and the citizens of each country will be able to travel to the other country. And what I find really important about this is you have two Arab nations, and there's going to be more, believe me, that are now recognizing Israel as a legitimate nation. So, did Donald Trump not offer any land at all? Well, not in the Abraham Accord, but here's where it gets a bit more complicated. The Abraham Accord is built off of the Trump peace plan, or the peace initiative between Israel and the Palestinians. That plan offered a two-state solution. Thus, there are those who say because of that, Trump is dividing up the Holy Land, and they're even saying that the United States is being judged because of it. I've even heard that the wildfires in California is God's response to this shameful deal. But again, have you looked into that peace deal? It's really interesting to see what others are saying. I read many articles from papers all over the world that state this was a deal that was designed to fail. Why? Because the way it is set up, the Palestinians will never go for it. They will never agree. This is why so many Jews are saying Trump's plan was the work of a genius, that this plan has allowed peace in the region without Israel giving up anything. Now listen to this. The peace treaty states there will be a two-state solution only if the Palestinians agree to these certain terms. And here they are. First one is recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. That is never going to happen. Now listen to this one. They must give up any claim to the old city of Jerusalem as a Palestinian capital. And that is never going to happen. Whenever you've seen them dialogue about peace, the Palestinians getting Jerusalem is a huge part of the deal, and they demand that that be met. Third thing, they must demilitarize Gaza and disarm Hamas. Again, that is never going to happen. Not too long ago, they were showing off their new weapons in Gaza. Next one, they must halt all payments to the families of terrorists. The Palestinian Authority spends approximately 10% of its annual budget, which is millions of dollars, each year to pay terrorists who attack Israel and to support their families. The Trump peace plan says that must stop, and again, that is something they will never agree to. Then the last condition is they must give up any thought of the right of return. Now, the right of return is the principle that Palestinian refugees who were part of the exodus from Israel in the 1948 Palestinian War and the 1967 Six-Day War, and their descendants, which would be about 6 million people, have the right to return to the land and say to those living in Israel, this is our land, this is our house, and you have to leave. Now, this has always been a huge sticking point to the peace treaty. Until that is allowed, the Palestinians say there will be no peace. But Trump's plan puts a condition upon them that they stop making that claim. Again, something they will never do. But here's what I find very interesting, how Trump's plan changed the thinking of the Middle East. What Trump's peace plan did was allow the Arabs to sign a peace treaty with Israel while saying to the Palestinians, you were offered peace, but you didn't take it, so that's on you. Now, why would the Arab nations suddenly care about peace with Israel? Well, do you remember when Trump announced the historic peace treaty between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain? Joe Biden immediately tried to take some credit. Well, right on, Joe. You do get credit because of the insane deal you and President Obama signed with Iran. The deal that only delayed but didn't stop Iran's nuclear proliferation, while handing them $150 to $180 billion to spread around to their terrorist proxies to destabilize the area. This deal did a couple of things. It showed the Arab nations that they couldn't count on the United States. It also strengthened Iran by pouring money into their coffers. And it allowed Iran to raise up as the bully in the territory. And make no mistake, Iran wants to control that territory. They want to control the land of Saudi Arabia as much as they want to destroy Israel. Why? Because of their theology. The two holiest sites in Islam, Mecca and Medina, are located in Saudi Arabia. And so when Obama and Biden made that deal with Iran, that changed the thinking of the Middle Eastern nations. Before that deal, everything was based on the Palestinians getting what they wanted. No peace with Palestine, no peace anywhere. And with this Arab backing, the Palestinians demanded Jerusalem and things like the right of return. But now the Arab nations had a bigger problem, which was Iran. Iran was the new bully on the block, and she was flush with cash and was flexing her muscles. Now, do you remember being in school where there were bullies? What did you do? You befriended those who were stronger, right? You hung around with those who weren't afraid of the bully. That is exactly what is happening in the Middle East. The Arab nations are concerned about Iran, so they're starting to cozy up to the only nation in the region that's not afraid of Iran, the only superpower in the area, which is Israel. And so the peace treaty of Donald Trump allowed all that. Why? One thing it did was it exposed the Palestinians. It showed that they didn't really want peace with Israel. They didn't want to coexist. They want to live in the land instead of Israel. It proved that they were not going to compromise. So did Donald Trump's peace plan give up any land? No, because the Palestinians would never agree. But what it has done, and this is impressive, it has allowed Arab nations to recognize Israel as a legitimate nation. And think of this, in a way it has really protected the land, hasn't it? It has said to the whole region, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Not 1 inch of the ancient city will be surrendered. And these other nations have agreed. So has Donald Trump carved up Israel? Well, I'll let you decide, but I just wanted to give you another slant as we approach the day of voting to show you what is happening over in Israel and the Middle East with the Abraham Accord. All right, God bless you guys. Hit those buttons and I'll see you in the next video.